Good evening, Barbadians and residents in Barbados. I'm here again this evening to report on the state of affairs as it relates to COVID-19. We last addressed you on Monday, and this evening we're coming to give you an update on a number of matters as it relates to the numbers, the issues with testing, etc. With me this evening to report to you will be the Minister of Health and Wellness, Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostic, and of course the Prime Minister, the Honourable Amor Mottley, will address you later. I'll call on Minister Bostic to address you at this point in time.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to give you this update based on tests that were completed yesterday and tests completed up to this point in time, recognizing that it is an ongoing process and there will be other figures that will be available later. Yesterday, we would have been able to report that the tests for January 6, 2004 tests were done with 34 new positives, and 8 persons were released from isolation. As of today, and this would be as of midday today, there were 1,431 tests done, 5 new positives, 8 persons to be released from isolation today, and there are other tests that are pending, as I indicated, and other tests that are being run. I would like to take this opportunity to really apologize to all persons who have experienced delays in getting back test results. This is because of the high volume of tests that are being done at the Best Dos Santos lab, and I can tell you that we've actually exceeded the 2,000 test barrier in one day. And as a result of the large volume of tests, it has created some challenges for us in terms of compiling results, processing results, disseminating results. There are several initiatives which we have undertaken in order to be able to overcome these difficulties. And I am sure that the Prime Minister in her address will speak to some of those issues, and if required, I will come back after the Prime Minister's speech to be able to amplify on anything that she says. But it is regrettable, but it is something that is happening in all countries that are facing surges in COVID. We've been able generally to manage this process before. We started with some issues just before Christmas, and as a result of this recent surge, even though we have added additional resources, technical as well as human resources to the process, we are still experiencing difficulties, but these difficulties are being addressed as I speak, and we are trying our very best to do much better in the very near future.
Thank you, Minister Bostic, and now I want to hand over to the Prime Minister, the Honourable Amor Mottley, who will address you on COVID situation in Barbados. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Walcott. Fellow Barbadians, it is my pleasure to be able to address to you this evening. I want to thank Minister Walcott and Minister Bostic again for their continued work on this path, as well as all of the personnel across the public service and private sector of Barbados who are working assiduously to help us in keeping Barbadians and our visitors safe as we move forward. I felt that it was appropriate for me to speak to you this evening on a number of things and to update you, because even though we are not in full position to do everything, you need to know what is being done in your name and how we are going forward. Minister Bostic has already spoken to you about the possibility, about the numbers, and I will ask him at the end to speak about the fact that we are trying to categorize the testing. As he indicated, regrettably, one of the things that happened when we started talking about the difficulties last weekend was that a number of persons literally were in difficulties, were nervous, not even necessarily persons who were primary or secondary, not even necessarily persons who were secondary or tertiary contacts, but persons who themselves just felt that they wanted to have a test. And we appreciate and understand that anxiety, but it has put a lot of pressure on the labs, and we're working with it, as Minister Bostic said. They've done thousands of tests in the last week, and to that extent, therefore, there is a backlog. We apologize for it. I've met with the officials over the course of the last 24 hours or so, trying to break down all of the different things that we are looking at. And we have agreed, as Minister Bostic said, for clear categorization of priorities for testing. We also would have noticed that, and I'll come back to that, that the CMO issued a statement earlier this week that would have spoken to what are the things that guide the criteria for testing for the public health officials. And that the first and most important thing is, one, whether a person is a primary contact, but not just a primary contact, were they in contact with anyone who was COVID positive in the last 5 days? Because if they were, that person will have to have 2 tests. And if they were longer than 5 days in contact, then the 1 test would be sufficient. That sounds complicated. Let me break it down. That basically, if you went for a test as a primary contact and it came back negative, you have to have a second test if you were in contact with the person less than 5 days ago. If, however, the contact was more than 5 days, you do not need a second test according to what they have and the science for them has guided them to. What I have discovered is that a lot of the problems is not even in relation to the tests, but in relation to the communication of the results. And we have agreed and deployed additional personnel, both, however, to the labs to generate the spreadsheets, because not everybody is fully on board with the SHAPE app yet. The SHAPE app is an app that allows the personnel testing to put everything into the app, and therefore it is immediately and automatically contacted. There are some polyclinics that are on it. They are on it at Paragon, they're on it at Gaia Inc., and as I said, some polyclinics. This evening, as we speak, the remaining polyclinics and private medical practitioners will be trained, and again tomorrow for those who missed this evening. Why? Because if we can put it in an automated process from early, it expedites the communication, the compilation, and the communication of the document. There can be email batching for those persons who are negative and are not primary contacts. So everybody except that person who was in touch with a COVID positive person within the last 5 days as a primary, and the positives, those 2 we have agreed must continue to receive their results from medical personnel. But all of the others who are negative, and negative as secondary or tertiary contacts, or out of curiosity, or indeed a primary contact, but from 7 and 8 and 10 days ago, they can all receive communication for their results from someone else. Now, it's critical that we explain this, because you then begin to understand that even though the lab has finished the tests, it is the communication that has literally crippled the system. I believe that we have taken and put in place the requisite numbers of persons. We've also asked all persons to focus on a parallel track on clearing the backlog, while at the same time ensuring that the teams that are necessary to keep current do exactly what they're supposed to do. Pursuant to that, Minister Bostic advised too that because of the 4 different categories of persons, which he will speak to afterwards, that they will reserve the Glebe Polyclinic and indeed the Brantford Tate Polyclinic for persons in Category 1 who have to test. And Category 1 typically will include all of your medical personnel, your frontline personnel, your security forces in the country, persons who are patients awaiting results, persons who are in an elderly care facility and therefore peculiarly at risk, our port and personnel, as well as our border security personnel. Those are your primary ones, because at the end of the day, we still have to keep a country capable of being governed. The other categories go into the persons who are secondary or tertiary contacts, the persons who are visitors, both in and outbound now, as you see in the rest of the world, requiring the same 72-hour test that we had required from them coming in here. Countries are requiring it for people visiting them from here as well. And of course, persons out of general curiosity. If we can get this right over the next few days, then we can come back on track. I have made it clear that I am not hiding anything from the people of Barbados, that if we have difficulties, this is one family, and I come to you and talk through these issues. In addition, I want to report to you that the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister Walker, has been exceptionally busy this week on my behalf, speaking to both a number of foreign governments. We have been in contact with the Cuban government, and we have requested a number of additional doctors, and specialists in particular, 2 communicable disease specialists, 2 respiratory disease specialists, 2 intensive care specialists, 2 anesthesiologists, 1 respiratory therapist. And for the lab, we've also requested 4 lab technicians who speak English to be able to assist us in the lab at the Dos Santos lab. At the same time, Minister Bostic has been in contact with the Pan American Health Organization, who have committed to sending in short order, a virologist who will continue to train persons to be able to ensure that we can provide respite for those who are working exceptionally long hours at the lab. They've been working flat out. Part of the difficulty of managing and leading a small country is that we do not have the depth of resources generally in terms of doubling and tripling and quadrupling. At the same time as we've been doing this, Minister Bostic has also been in deep discussions with the Chinese government with respect to the purchase of an additional mobile lab, which will considerably boost our capacity beyond the number of machines and personnel that we have at the Dos Santos lab. That mobile lab is a combination of persons and robotics, so therefore it is not as labor intensive. My understanding is that one such will become available on the 20th of January, and they're now discussing the logistics of transport, whether and how best to get it here, because of the fact that it is really literally a truck outfitted with all of the mobile apparatus that we need. In addition to all of those, I have been in contact this week again with the Director General of PAHO and the Director General of the World Health Organization, and I'd like to publicly thank both Dr. Clarissa Etienne and Dr. Tedros from the WHO, Dr. Etienne from PAHO. Both of them have been a source of tremendous support. There have also been a few other persons who have helped us. I'd like to also say that through them in particular, apart from these external relations matters that we have received assistance in or will receive assistance in, that have also been seeking to see how best we can expedite access to vaccines. We have, in fact, paid just under $5 million Barbados dollars through the cooperation of the charity and the government of Barbados working together for the COVAX vaccines that will come for 20% of the population. But without prejudice to that, I spoke to you on Monday evening and indicated we are seeking to get far more than that. And in fact, we are in a position now where we believe that we can, as early as this weekend, be able to access just a handful that will allow us to be able to ensure that those persons who are completely on the front line can go about their task having received the first vaccine. And we're hoping that we can do that. We are deep in discussions with it. I will come back to the country and indicate what, if we are successful, who are the 4 or so people who will get it, while we continue to be able, over the next few weeks, to be able to seek if we can procure for the majority of frontline personnel and vulnerable populations that we need to get it for. With respect to the issue of us moving forward with persons and communication, we accept that the communication of the government can be a little stronger and better on this issue. But in particular, in the Ministry of Health, health communications is a dedicated field. As a result, I've agreed with the Minister of Health for the establishment, and the chairman of the Cabinet Subcommittee, Minister Walcott, for the establishment of a dedicated health communications team, because the truth is that as we are doing all of this and speaking to you, we are still busy trying to execute and bring things together. And what I've asked for now is a dedicated health communications team. There are persons who we've not fully spoken to, and two of them I'm in the process of speaking to today. Two have already committed, but I think that I'm at liberty to speak to you about those who have committed already. Three of them have committed, actually, out of the four so far. I have asked Ambassador Elizabeth Thompson, who, in fact, I was recalling to work from home in Bridgetown as an ambassador plenipotentiary from the end of January, and I've asked her to bring forward that date immediately to this weekend so that she can come as a former Minister of Health and an effective communicator, and indeed as someone herself who suffered from COVID, to lead that process of communications so as to facilitate the rest of us being able to focus on that which we must execute. Ambassador Thompson, as you know, was the person in the forefront of us helping to fight with the HIV/AIDS virus. In fact, we well remember that she led the fight along with others for the provision of AZT to pregnant mothers to reduce the mother-to-child transmission on that. And therefore, she's well familiar with it. She's also at the United Nations been at the center of a lot of the discussions surrounding this virus, and therefore we believe she is well placed. I can announce to you at the same time that obviously since we had, and this is therefore not a knee-jerk reaction, I had already agreed and designated Ambassador Francois Jackman to be moved from our embassy at Beijing to go to be our permanent representative at the United Nations, because, as I said, we were bringing Ambassador Thompson home to be able to deal with a number of issues, because one of the consequences of the COVID has been the fact that most business and diplomatic business, a lot of it is taking place at Capitol now, plus we have some serious issues with law of the sea and the Seabed Authority that I want her to focus on. Clearly, this has happened, and I've asked her, therefore, to defer on that to allow us to get through this period of communications as we go forward. The second person in that group, and I'm very happy that I've been able to speak to the president of the Barbados Association of Medical Practitioners, Dr. Linda Williams, who herself is not only a doctor but an epidemiologist, and she has agreed that she will serve on that. I have expressed our regret that the level of communications has not been as good as it should be, and I've agreed with Dr. Williams that we can do better, and to that extent I've asked her to serve on this, and she has willingly agreed to be a part of this team. In addition to that, I've asked Mr. Tyson Henry, a former editor at The Nation, who is working with us on public affairs, to also be a dedicated person for that team, because they have to be able to generate content to be able to get it to all quarters within the Barbadian society in short order. And there is one other person who I have not yet spoken to, who has been a specialist in the Ministry of Health for years, and who I hope will join that health communications team. My friends, we are juggling a lot, and therefore I'm not going to fool you. The notion that I can come here every day, or even Minister Walcott every day, or Minister Bostic, is going to be difficult. And hence that health communications team is critical, while we at the same time keep the nuts and bolts going and do what we have to keep Barbadians safe and to keep our country safe. At the same time, I've been in discussions with many of the public health persons over the last 24 to 36 hours, and I'm now satisfied that the actions that we took, which were reflected in yesterday's directive, to be able to insist that mask wearing inside of public buildings, not homes, public buildings, is now mandatory, as well as we had already provided for it, but we repeated it. Masks must be worn on all forms, in all forms of public transport in this country. As I understand it, unlike the flu, this virus does not move in a linear fashion, but it moves in clusters. And therefore, when I said to you that we are shutting down the public service of Barbados from regular activity to be able to allow it to operate on remote work where necessary, I meant it. And indeed, over the last 2 days, for the first time in the history of this country, the conduct of estimates meetings is being done virtually, as opposed to persons being huddled in a big, long room, going through for hours the details of the budget as we prepare our budgets to get them to Parliament for next month. because life still goes on. And we don't have the luxury of dropping everything because Barbados is in COVID. So as we manage that, we have literally been able to use the virtual opportunities to get things going. At the same time, the private sector graciously agreed that as far as possible, they too would encourage their members to have persons work in work with, with remote work as well. I am in the process of consulting, and I'm telling you up front, I'm not going to commit to it without consultation because that is not nature. This is an update. It's not a proclamation. But I am now satisfied that we need to consult with the private sector and the unions that between from Sunday on, we should be reintroducing the alphabet system for both supermarkets, hardware stores, and banks as we had earlier this year. Not because we're panicking, but out of an abundance of caution to be able to keep the numbers down. At the same time, for those who continue to call for the shutting of our borders, and I had this same conversation with Dr. Williams here again, the reality is that the numbers that are coming into our borders are literally next kin to nothing in terms of what we would normally have had. So for example, over the course of the days of this week, cumulatively for the whole day, a country that would normally take thousands of persons coming into our country at this time of the year, we are taking less than 300-400, in some instances 200 and something, 300 and something, 400 and something. You'll get a spike probably to 500 on a weekend, on a Saturday. But the numbers have dropped. Where we need those flights, as I said earlier, is because we have thousands of people. We have 3,000 British persons alone. We have Americans, we have Canadians, we have other Caribbean people. And what is of significance to me as I look at the daily things is that, for example, Caribbean flights are in fact a lot more than a lot of the others, largely because most people are no longer coming in from those areas because they themselves are having serious problems with the virus and they have generally shut down. An additional burden will be put on us, and we're conscious of it and we're planning for it, to the extent that persons who are traveling to Canada and to the UK probably will have to travel with tests as well, just as we require persons to travel with 72-hour tests. And we are therefore working towards ensuring that we get all of that in place for Barbadians and visitors who may have to travel outside at the same time. My friends, this is a challenging moment for the country, but I'm satisfied that if we continue to track and trace and test, if we continue to be patient and let us get the vaccinations in here, the vaccines in here as fast as possible so that we can do vaccinations. As I said, there is a possibility this weekend that there may be 4 vaccines that are available. We are not sure of it yet. We will know in another few hours, but we have agreed that, and we've had consultation at the higher levels of cabinet, that if those are there, the first person that we would want to offer a vaccination to in this country is Dr. Corey Ford, our lone infection specialist who has done yeoman work and who is on the front line with all of the facilities in the country. Similarly, Mr. Singh, who has been the main person doing the testing and even going on cruise ships and boats and climbing, will be the second. The Minister of Health, I believe, has to be there in order to be able to continue running this exercise as he has been doing for the last 12 months, and we need him to continue to do it. And there's a debate going on, and I've been fighting it. The rest believe that I must take it as Prime Minister, but we are still in deep discussions on that, and we will settle on that. But if I have to, I will, if only also because I know that there are some people who are vaccine skeptics, and we need to let persons know that these vaccines are things that we have been accustomed to from children. Yes, there's always a risk, but the risk invariably is negligible in comparison to the benefits that we gain with respect to it. Without prejudice to those 4, though, however, I really, really want to hope that within the next 4 to 8 weeks we can have vaccines in Barbados of some type to at least start to ensure that that which we need to keep our country stable, the medical personnel, the security forces, those who are most vulnerable but who are needed to be able to have their lives protected, or those who are most vulnerable because they need to help us protect and maintain order in a society, and to protect and guard those who will need our help, must be in the priority list as we go forward. I wanted to have this briefing, not because, as I said, we are at a stage where everything is finished, but I learned a long time ago, especially with the prison, that it is important to communicate with the people when the prison fire happened. And we are here to communicate with you amidst all of the other things that we are doing. But I give you the assurance that as soon as we can get the health comms team up and running, and I hope that that will be no later by Monday or Tuesday. Clearly, Ambassador Thompson, when she comes in, will have to join us virtually first because she will be in quarantine, although her case is interesting because she is already a person who has suffered from COVID, as we all know, and I'm not talking out her business, but it was already in the paper and she's already spoken about it publicly. Barbadians, we are a lot better than we were last weekend, but we are not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination. I am heartened by the manner in which you are responding for the most part and for which you are being responsible. I go back to the original things. You do not get COVID just because somebody walks in the room with you who is positive. The doctors have been consistent in their communication on this matter. And that is why they've said if we wear the mask, if we sanitize, and if we keep physical distance, we significantly reduce the risk of being able to catch COVID by more than 80%. Now, if we know that, and if the mask out here cheap and can hold it, and if we can go and wash our hands or get those sanitizer, and the easiest thing and the freest thing to do is to tell people, look, don't come up and meet me here, not unless you're living in the same household. We could talk. Right now, the cameramen are more than 6 feet away from me and they're hearing everything I say. The man who is editing is about 25 feet from me, and he is nodding his head because he's hearing everything I say. So that we know that we can talk and lime and gaff and do all of those things without necessarily being up under each other. We can work, we can do everything that we need to do. But I need you to stay the course, because this is not bigger than us. And if we have the will to do the right thing, as I told you, from the smallest among us to the oldest among us, then I know we shall make it. But believe you me, it requires cooperation. I really regret that there are those who continue to prey upon this population for their own personal reasons and believe that now is the time to be divisive. It is not. And the government is not standing on ceremony. I told you, Dr. Williams and BAM had a perspective. I felt that as Prime Minister, I needed to talk with them. I talked with her. We have other conversations to have. And believe you me, we will be working together as one people, because Barbados and Barbadians are bigger than this, and we know what it is to be resilient, and we know what it is to conquer. Sometimes, however, battles take time. And it is that patience. I know what it is. I mean, when people talk about patience, remember that we literally knew what it was to fight different battles for long periods of time. If you want to also study and get a degree, how long you got to do it for? Not 3 and 4 years. If you want to do something and become a master craftsman as a joiner, or a master craftsman as a mason, or a master carpenter, you can't do it for 3 and 6 months and be there just so. So my friends, I want to say to us, let us stay the course. Fortunately for us, there are people both locally and internationally who are willing to work with us in this battle. There are some of you who want to help. It is difficult sometimes to coordinate all of the voluntary efforts, but we are working hard to do it because we do not want to be ungrateful, nor do we want to reject any help that we truly can benefit from. But it does require, in a complex system, but small government, for us to be very careful and methodical as we go about this, while every day dealing with the unexpected. So, I'm here. I'll see you again soon, but I hope that you will have this health communications team talking to you. I hope that we will get the completion of the discussions with the private sector and the labor movement by the end of tonight, such that a press release can go out as to whether we agree on the reintroduction of the alphabet. I want to do it. I'm strong about it, and I have every confidence that they will agree. But I don't believe in that I should just announce it without being able to speak to them. But I wanted to speak to you before it got too late this evening, because it is important that everyone be on the same page in these matters. I'm happy that the numbers are not in the hundreds as they were last weekend, but as I said, that does not mean we are out of the woods. And believe you me, I don't drop my guard. I don't want you dropping your guard. But let us together go forward. Thank you, Minister Walker.
I want to ask the Minister of Health to come again to speak in terms of the categories and as it relates to testing and the timelines for testing. Minister Bostic.
The categories for testing and timelines, which I am about to announce, will go a long way towards facilitating the speedy return of results for those persons who require results back by a particular time. It also will allow us to facilitate the contact tracing process, which is really the most important thing when it comes to testing, because if we are to contain the spread of the virus as we are seeking to do at this point in time, then it is important that we get to those primary contacts of known positive cases so that we can deal with the matter. And that is why we are going to be going in the direction that I will announce. So category 1 will include medical officers, primary contacts of positive cases, policemen, inmates of Her Majesty's Prison Dodds, soldiers, all medical personnel, border security, immigration officers, customs officers, Barbados Port Inc. officers, patients awaiting tests for medical treatment, patients in elder care facilities, and all of these persons in this category can expect results within 24 hours. I would like to state here that persons who may be considered as secondary contacts emanating from a positive case will become primary contacts if the primary contact from that case then tests positive, and this is very important. Category 2, inbound and outbound visitors, and they can expect results within 24 hours. Category 3, secondary and tertiary contacts, results in 36 to 48 hours. And category 4, those that we consider to be general curiosity, someone who decides that they just want to have a test, those will be back in 48 to 72 hours. As far as the testing centers are concerned, the testing centers for category 1 only, will be the Glebe and Brantford Tate polyclinics. These are the 2 centers that will be reserved for category 1 tests. In this way, we will be able to manage this process far better than we are doing now. We accept that we have been overpowered by this because the surge in the number of persons requiring tests really bowled us over. And so we knew from about 2 days ago that we had to find a solution, a mechanism to deal with this problem. And we believe with these new categories and the timelines given that we will be able to bring this to some sort of closure. So with those few remarks, I hand back over to Minister Walker.
Thank you, Minister Bostic. I believe the Prime Minister wants to speak. Yeah.
Thank you, Jerome. I just wanted to make it absolutely clear that we will have a meeting between BAMP and the government and the private sector, because obviously I know the private sector does not like the idea of the alphabet system, but by the same token, the doctors, both in BAMP and public health, have all felt that between now and the 14th of January in the first instance, we should go there. I am inclined to support them, but as I said, out of a matter of fairness, a meeting will be held, hopefully this evening, and we can, or latest tomorrow morning, and we will get this resolved and have the directive done by tomorrow afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And you've heard from the Prime Minister, we've heard from Minister Bostic. For those of you who are wondering, as it relates to the prison, we indicated that we were going to set up a medical unit there, and I'm pleased to announce that in terms of that and in terms of the preparation that were made over the last few days, that has been set up. Staff have been assigned. Indeed, I must inform you that two ventilators are now at the prison, not being used, but they're there just in case someone was to become seriously ill. That is not the case at this time. And in general, the condition of the prisoners, as we would anticipate, there is some anxiety, but I can report that their second test has been done. Second test has been completed, the Minister confirms, for the prisoners there, and indeed for the prison officers. All I can say at this point in time is that we want you to remain calm, take the necessary precautions. There are indications, early indications, that more than stabilizing, that it seems as though the numbers of positive cases are declining. We are doing much larger numbers of tests, and indeed, the numbers seem to be heading in the right direction for us. We're merely asking all Barbadians to take the necessary precautions. Remember your masks, wear them properly. Remember to wash your hands frequently and sanitize them, and to maintain physical distance. I thank you and good evening to all of you Barbadians.